This episode of Ticket Volume is brought to you by us, InvGate. Get service operations under control in no time. Get 1 free month of our software solution by going to try.invigate.com. Ticket Volume is proud to present 3 guests doing the good work in this space. We start with a psychologist, sleep coach, and consultant whose specialties include coaching, clinical operations, implementation science, as well as program and product development. They've worked at companies and industries in digital health like LifeMoves, Aduro, Optum, and Wobot, to name a few. They're also active on the Therapists in Tech community. Our second guest is a CX advisor who is also a qualified public relations specialist and clinical psychotherapist. They're a speaker, mentor, and globally recognized certified customer experience professional. They got their start at Bunnings and Officeworks for over 16 years before starting the Aileen Day Advisory, and has partnered with Sage as a CX editor and mentor for their CX Academy case study series. Last but not least, we have the founder of Empathic Engineering with a degree in mechanical engineering and published research on developing empathy in engineers. They've also worked at a ton of different companies like Trek Bicycle, California Polytechnic State University, GE Healthcare, Ford, and many others. Welcome to Ticket Volume, news and information for improving IT experiences. I'm your host, Matt Beran, and on each episode, I get to chat with different leaders and share their insights on service management, technology, business, mental health, you name it. And this episode is going to make more room for whatever you need. Hey, do you want to continue the conversation after this episode? Comment on YouTube, Spotify, or if you're on Spotify, check out our surveys that we're providing with our podcast. Use these options to dig in deeper into these topics, or just tell me that my microphone is too close to my mouth. So without further ado, I hope you're having a great day and a week, and I also hope that you'll leave a comment or connect with us, get involved, get us improving. Now let's begin. Welcome to Ticket Volume, Dr. Erika Torres, Aileen Day, and Emily Hubbard.
Thank you
for having us.
Hello.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this day for a few weeks now because, of course, you're all very busy people. And I did want to start off right away with a simple disclaimer, because it's important that when people are suffering, sometimes they need to hear the message that we're going to be talking about mental health here. It could be triggering. There may be some stereotypes involved. Sweeping generalizations are really easy to do when you're talking about these topics. And they're not meant to be stereotypes. They're not meant to be applied to individuals. It really is a generalization. So if you are looking for someone to talk to or just feeling down, please do seek professional counseling. It is super useful. This episode of Ticket Volume is not going to replace a good therapist. I wish I could do that for everyone, but I can't. And if you are looking for help, check out the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses, or NAMI. You can call them, or you can also call 211 for mental health help, or 988 if you are in a crisis. And Erika Torres pointed out that Cal Hope also is another resource that you can use. They've got warm lines waiting, which is, I think, just someone to talk to and get what you need, which is usually what all of us need, is just someone to listen. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I want to talk real quick about occupational mental health. Where are we at? Is everyone healthy? Like, what is the general barometer for occupational mental health? Erika Torres, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, that's a really big question. I think it really depends on the industry. I'm most familiar with the mental health industry and tech industries. And, especially when folks are in tech providing digital health interventions, that can be a bit of a challenge, because oftentimes those providers are also in need of support. I mean, all of us are usually in need of support at some point or another, but oftentimes that can be really challenging. And the work that I've done with therapists in tech is really about acknowledging, recognizing, and trying to do something about the fact that, yes, digital mental health is important, and for access and for all the reasons, but what are we doing to take care of the providers themselves? because oftentimes I have large caseloads. It's just, how do you scale mental health when you need a person to do it? And when you need certain productivity metrics, it gets really complicated. And I think that's one specific area, but obviously in other industries as well, where we're trying to increase productivity and scale, when humans are involved, it's going to be really difficult to do that without burning folks out. So
empathy fatigue.
Yeah.
Say that again?
I said empathy fatigue. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And if you're experiencing it as a manager, you can hear from Erika Torres right here that she's recommending help for those people. So if you're feeling empathy fatigue, definitely speak up. Emily, was that striking a chord with you?
Yes. I mean, there's no question. My background's primarily manufacturing, but different industries, I would say, create a culture that does perpetuate certain tendencies in mental health. And I'll say it even started in college. It's this idea that you're sacrificing so much of your well-being, your time and energy in order to get a degree that has a lot of merit. And then you get into industry and you're surrounded by people that also pursued these really tech-heavy degrees and didn't actually get time to study skills like communication and other very important things that I think get forgotten. And so, yes, empathy fatigue happens, I believe, as a result of not having tools to be able to work well together at the beginning.
Excellent point. Totally agree. And I think, do I hear a blondie in the background?
We have a visitor.
Is there a little visitor coming right now at this time?
He's been intercepted at the gates. He's been intercepted for the moment. I don't know how long the threshold's going to hold.
Ask your kid what they think.
It's a 6'4". It's a 6'4" beaded threshold.
Oh my God.
Gotcha.
I have faith in it.
And I would really like your answer to this question, Aileen, because you went on at length actually about kind of why the tech industry is like in this tropical storm. It was inevitable that we would get to this point. What are your perspectives on mental health, the state of mental health in tech?
Look, I think just natural. I have to apologize.
No, you don't.
You know that BBC thing where he was doing the international correspondent and these kids come in and they're like, I feel like that's about to be me, but I'm not a BBC correspondent. I think the natural firestorm is inevitable because the tendency for the type of person that enters those industries is time after time shown to be a particular type of person. And again, like this is a sweeping statement, but it is also a sweeping statement founded in, accurate information over time. And if I think about, I've been an IT project manager for a multi-billion-dollar organization. And if I think about the types of people who worked in different areas of IT, they very much had a stereotypical personality type. And so when I kind of start working with these people and trying to learn more about them, and as you said, Emily, communicate with them, communication is not ultimately something that is a strong or a strength in their toolkit. And when you learn about how perhaps they've developed through the years, how they've got where they've got at this day and age in their careers, a lot of it was because they locked themselves in a room, they studied really hard, they focused on what they loved, which happened to be technology. And technology isn't always a teamwork kind of game. A lot of it comes down to your personal dedication, your insights, your skills to develop something. And then they come into this industry where they're thrust into a teamwork situation. Mm-hmm. They've not been taught nor developed into a team person. And so that's confronting to them. That can cause conflict. And we talked earlier about conflict, management. But it also becomes really kind of confronting to them when they have to or are expected to communicate, not just, what they're doing because they've lived this life so far of autonomy, but they're expected to communicate what they're doing, and they're also expected to communicate how they feel. And those tend to be, in my experience, things that they have never had to do consistently. And now they've got to do it to a manager, right? And it's like someone that cares about them. It's not that, intimately cares about them. This is, someone they don't know, someone they're not familiar with, someone they haven't necessarily got a rapport with yet. And you're expected to just, and you're like, that's not a thing that's going to happen. And so then when you get a team of these types of personalities, it's a shitstorm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love what you were talking about, Aileen, with schooling. And since kindergarten, we've had this idea that we get rewarded for primarily our independent work. And then you step into industry, and you might realize in your first job that it is actually a whole team that you have to work on inevitably. But then as people go from engineers to getting promoted to be managers, I think that gap is when it becomes really obvious that the whole system was kind of, confusing us.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing too. You're expecting now people that were trained in a technical field to become people.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've noticed that across the board, not just in tech, but in all kinds of industries. And there's interesting research on this around how, even though we know it's not true, and there's enough research to support the fact that great individual contributors don't necessarily make great managers, we continue to do that. We see great potential in individual contributors. We think they're amazing. They're doing a great job. They're selling a lot. They're coding a lot, whatever. And then we set them up to fail because there's not enough training usually, or scaffolding or support to get individual contributors to be good people managers. And I think folks confuse what it means to be a good individual contributor and do a great job at, the tasks that are assigned to them, and how that might or may not translate to leading people, inspiring people, and being able to communicate with others. And I think that really does cut across industries, and especially with tech, where you might find some folks who are more attracted to tech for the perceived, I actually wonder about this, like, how did we arrive at this potential belief that sort of like the history of why certain folks are attracted to certain industries, and tech being one of them, and folks who might be more reserved or might prefer to sort of code on their own. I do wonder how we got there, because even though you can't contribute individually and code your zeros and ones by yourself, it's always been a team effort. Really, even, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure how we arrived. Maybe we're just more aware and we have more insight into the fact that this is happening, but it's always been there. I'm not really sure, but I am very curious of what folks think about that.
Well, I'll give you some insight as from my perspective anyway. Like this weekend, for example, I had a 22-year-old young woman that was with me at an event for some Spaniards that we're hosting. And she said, I'm getting into cybersecurity. And I asked why. And she said, well, I don't really like working with people. I was very happy to let her know that is the wrong career for her then. Because all of cybersecurity is people. That is literally the only thing you will be working with. I mean, there are software elements too. There are security elements too. But mostly cybersecurity work is working with people. And so I think I had the same assumption when I was growing up, and I think a lot of people at my age, I'm in my 40s. Woo! Everyone over 46 when I moved.
Emily's like,
your
good
age
for
is
you
showing.
three.
But what I think a lot of us didn't really know what a career in technology would look like, because it didn't exist necessarily, right? The technology industry didn't really exist, or it wasn't pervasive. What we saw about it wasn't necessarily the actual situation. And so we have this perception that it's wrong. And oh my gosh, we hit on my favorite topic. Individual contribution does not make you a great manager. Oh my gosh. It is such a big deal where people are promoted to manager roles and HR doesn't have the training in place. They don't have, I love the term you used, scaffolding. They don't have the scaffolding in place to let them safely grow their skills, right?
And I think also in that there's this interpretation that to move up and through your organization, the next inevitable step must be leadership. And that's not for everybody. And I could tell you, and I think I did tell you, Matt, when we first caught up, that's how I became an IT manager. And it was not for my IT skills at all. Like my ex-husband, who studied software development at university, said to me, how could you get a job in IT? I went to university and still struggled to get a job in IT. You can't turn your laptop on without help, and you're leading IT, multi-million-dollar IT projects. How? And I said to him, the reality is I'm certainly not put in that role of leadership because of my skill set. It was literally because I had proven to the powers that be that I was agile and capable of working with diverse groups of skill sets, diverse groups of levels of business, and able to get what was needed from those people. And to be honest, if someone said, how do you do that? I actually, at the time, I've reflected on it years later, but at the time, I couldn't tell you. I could only say to my ex-husband, I just know how to talk to them. And he, as someone who's not overly excellent at communication, he was, the stereotypical, zeros and ones guy. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And they love talking to me like I was a 5-year-old because they get to but then there were other elements where I could talk to.
I have to add something, Aileen, because I think this is really important. You said, I just talk to people. First of all, that's undermining the skill, which is an incredibly important skill. And unfortunately, the ability to communicate and work well with people is characteristically feminine. In our society, we undervalue feminine qualities without recognizing it in a lot of situations. And so I think it's really badass that you did get an IT manager position, not based on your technical skill set, maybe, but that's one skill set, right? And so you have something that other people want to learn from. And I think that's really the barrier that I've come up against a lot lately, even in charging for my services, right? So I say conflict management, and the different words that I use give people different perceptions of how valuable it is to their company. I saved one company $70,000 US in 3 days. And that still is like not comprehensible when I say, but I do it because I teach empathy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I had a similar reaction to, like, you were talking about, not because of my skills, but yeah, you have, what we call soft skills, right? For whatever,
which are the hardest of all.
For reasons, we can get into all the social constructs and ways in which we ended up calling them soft skills, but those are very powerful skills. and they can be taught. And that's an interesting exercise. For some of us, it comes so naturally, maybe because of social expectations or whatnot, gender norms, and they can be learned. They really can. And so I think we're doing folks a disservice by making an assumption that if these kinds of skill sets, like being able to communicate, to empathize, to read people's body language, to be able to build rapport with other people, it's just not a given for them, that they just are doomed to never be able to improve upon that. And I think that's oftentimes what causes a lot of stress in folks in the workspace, right? Especially if they have insight into their challenges, and especially if most of those challenges are interpersonal, and they're sort of aware of their deficits and opportunities for growth, and no one really is looking at it from a strengths-based perspective. Like, here are the 3 things, right? I know folks appreciate checklists. I also appreciate checklists. It's like, these are the things you need to do. Consider these 5 things next time that you're in interaction with someone, right? And oftentimes, like, even just role playing and sort of understanding their perspective and what they're thinking, what they think the other person's thinking, and trying to help them bridge the gap can be really helpful. So I do believe it's something you can learn. Is it more challenging for some of us than others? Yeah. Just like, I'm sure I could learn how to code if I really wanted to, but am I passionate about it? Is that my default state? Is that how I see the world? It isn't, but I can totally learn it if I wanted to, right? So,
oh my gosh,
I think we just need to be mindful of those opportunities.
Yeah. I want to know, Dr. Torres, how do you role play with teams? Like, what's something you've done?
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So, I mean, a role play it's actually a therapeutic tool, but I think it's also a very interpersonal tool. So let's say that someone is having a challenge. I mean, do you want to role play?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love role playing.
It's easier to do it. I can totally get into the theory of it, but it will be really boring. But yeah, why don't we role play something if you want? What is the situation?
Okay. Yeah. A situation that I lived through. So I have a manager that has yelled at me in front of my coworkers, and I get visibly nervous. I've actually started shaking when we're in team discussions. Whether or not I'm getting yelled at, I'm anticipating it. So I've tried to talk about this with other people, their supervisor, HR, and I don't feel supported. So I guess what would be the first conversation to have?
Wow, that's a really deep one. I think there's the one way to think about it would be, how do you advocate for yourself with this person who is bullying you, actually, to just acknowledge that this is probably not a really healthy relationship. And what kinds of things would you want to tell this person if you had the courage and felt the support? What would you want to say to this person who makes you feel uncomfortable and calls you out inappropriately in meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to say how I feel even, and I felt like that was confronted with a kind of blockade, like emotional blockade. and that's where I feel stuck, because I'll say, well, if you're telling me that I can't work with these people and I don't really understand how to do my job, like, maybe I'm asking for support, but I need to help. I need to understand where they're coming from also.
Yeah. So one thing we can try is to speak about how you feel and in relation to that person. So maybe you can say to this person, when you called me out at this meeting and said A, B, C, D, it actually wasn't helpful. It made me feel ineffective. And I still am not clear on what you want me to do. So, could you tell me what you want me to do? And can we have a conversation about this in private? So, because I want you to look good. I want us to look good. We're a team here. And if I look bad, you're probably not looking great because you're my manager. So I need to know what it is that you want me to do. Lists really work for me. We can write it down. I will practice it. And that way, next time we are in a meeting, I know exactly what you want. I don't have to guess, and we'll both look better. How does that sound? Right?
Great.
Something like that.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes. Love
Yeah.
it.
And some folks will be more receptive, others not so much. And we just kind of build on that. But that would be the type of intervention or the type of skill building, right? And there's like many elements to that. This was just a brief example, but that's the kind of coaching that folks can, for whom having these conversations may not be as natural. And let me just say, like, even folks who might feel experts and like really empowered, these conversations are hard.
Yeah.
So even if you have the skills, it's overwhelming. It's unpleasant, especially if you're feeling, hurt and unsafe. So there's definitely the skill building and the skill set, but also the ability to adapt to the environment, which may be really crappy. So even if you're super skilled, if it's a shitty environment, it's going to be really hard to be your best, most effective communicator, right?
What's really good about what happened, and I want to thank you both for actually just doing this on this podcast, because this is kind of what my therapy looks like. I have this problem. It was this situation. So-and-so was yelling at me. I shut down, blah, blah, blah. And then my therapist says that stuff back. She says, what did you want to say to them? What would you say now? And then they give you language and techniques to really employ at work. And I love it. It overcomes so many challenges. If you follow the Reddit, so there's a subreddit called Narcissistic Boss. And it is full of situations.
Lots of material.
Case study after case study.
Yeah, it's full of stuff like that. And I wish someone had told me that sooner. And that's why I'm so glad that we're having this podcast and that you two did that live in this situation, because whether you're experiencing that for real or not, Emily, what a great example of why we need support, why we need help. And that language, specifically the language you used, Erika, Dr. Torres. When you do this, I feel this.
Yeah.
It's like the most powerful statement you can make, because they can't contradict you.
Yeah.
They literally did that thing. You literally felt that way. There's no room for interpretation. And so it's so powerful. Oh my gosh.
Some folks might still try, right? Some folks might still try to deny that you felt what you felt. So it really is good to start with like, I feel this way, because even if folks disagree, it is your feeling and your experience. So it's true for you, right? So I think, it can get complicated, but certainly it helps in most cases.
That's a good way to put it. It can get complicated. It totally can.
Always.
If you were thinking about telling your boss off and you just listened to this episode, don't necessarily just go and do it right now.
And
I like not actually scaffolded and or empowered to do that yet.
I just really one last thing, because I think it's funny. You may not, but when I talk to folks about the I statements, it's like I think you're an asshole is not an I statement.
That's funny.
That means an opinion, than I, but still not a nice statement. It's really about you. Right. So consider that.
Yes. Good stuff. Okay. So we're here. We got here as an industry where we have challenges communicating. We have interpersonal challenges. We have a hard time inviting customers onto our agile teams. Sometimes even our own engineers are just like socially not close together. Our teams aren't necessarily getting along. What as a leader, as an industry, or as people in these situations, what should we be doing? What is the work, right? Like, I say that I'm going to therapy as an individual, because I am. What should a team do? What should a leader do? What is the work for those people? We'll start with Emily. What kind of advice do you give people that are like, when you go into a team and they're not communicating well, what do you kind of start with?
The most important thing, I believe, is getting input from everyone involved, because another point about promoting people that might not be ready for manager positions is that we tend to promote the person that talks the loudest and the most. So if I go and I'm just asking a manager what the problems are on the team, I am almost guaranteed to not know what everyone else is feeling. And so what I've seen a lot, because I lived in Mexico for 3 years, I did a lot of my work in Spanish, which is my non-native language, is that people on international teams often also get silenced just because of their English speaking ability. And so I really do my best to slow down. You know, if I can talk to someone in Spanish, cool, that's ideal, because they get a chance to express their self in their non-native language, or in their native language. And it's, yeah, just important, I think, to give people the time and space, which, yeah, you can feel it. I mean, it's palpable. Someone cares about me. And then from that point, I think conflict management just becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I totally have to agree. We see it in the CX space, don't we, Aileen? As soon as you start talking to people and understanding how they feel and what they need, you start opening doors. What would you say we need to do, Aileen, when you think about our industry? What is something that we can do to overcome this giant challenge that we have?
So I think, you know, when I think about the way I go about going into organizations, I have a 3-step kind of process that I take on. And the first step, and I always say there's 3 sides to the truth. There's yours, mine, and the actual truth, right? So to try to get to the truth and figure out where the underlying root causes of problems are coming from, I start with a customer experience survey. And so I get a randomized sample of customers and I ask them a realm of questions regarding their experience with the organization. And from there, I do analytics around where were the shortcomings, where were the wins. And then I go into the organization as step 2, and I do multiple day observations. And in those observations, I start asking questions. Now, my LinkedIn profile used to start with the asker of questions, right? Because people would say to me, you ask a lot of questions. And I guess that was because I value curiosity and I value understanding people on a deeper level than what it was. And so Emily very kindly said, you know, you downplay your skills when you say you just, you know, talk to people. I understand that now. But back then I thought I just spoke to people. Now what I understand is that I have an intent and genuine curiosity to learn about individuals and teams and their partnerships and how they rely on each other, how they have those interdependencies, how they play out for the customer, how they play out for the individual, for the team, for the organization. And the reality is that when you start getting curious on a deeper level past productivity, right?
Yeah.
People will start to realize I feel valued. And at that point, the game changes.
Yeah.
When people start to even the toughest of critics and the toughest of skins starts to think someone actually cares genuinely on a deeper level as to what it is that I'm delivering, as to how I sleep at night, how my commute to and from work affects me, how my 2-year-old screaming at the door might have impacted my day. You know, those things. When people would say to me back in the day, don't bring your home life to work, I am the complete opposite. I'm like, you can't not. Especially the hours we pull these days, you can't not. And so when you've got, you know, like I tend to do advisory work for larger organizations, when you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals with individual life experiences, human experiences, coming into your one building or your organization, and some of them might be from international locations, some of them might be local, that is a melting pot of interesting human experiences that are ultimately and directly impacting and affecting the way your business works. And so to be curious and to genuinely care, and I think it's interesting what you said before, Emily, around empathy fatigue. I'm not going to lie, I have had empathy fatigue. I have got to the point as a leader where I have had team member after team member after team member tell me, you know, the woes and lows of their life, like I'm their, you know, counselor. And that is the job of the leader, is to kind of absorb some of that so that they can then feel better about their day, go back and get their work done. Or, you know, we talked about offering them, you know, employee assistance program services. But as a leader, you can really, really become burnt out and get to the point where you care less and less and less about other people's shit. And it's really, really problematic because, and I say this to my clients all the time, who's looking after your leaders, right? Who is looking after them to make sure that they don't punch someone's face out? Because that's a problem, right? Yes, you probably have not. I mean, it's a stack of cards that is potentially going to fall at any minute if you haven't, as you said, Dr. Torres, got the structure in place for leadership, and then so you've got perhaps the wrong person in the role who is expected to now take on their team's worth of, you know, feelings and emotions and hard days and struggles and budget complaints and, you know, project creep and all this stuff, or, you know, support expectations. And then your brain is like, I'm not built for this. I didn't sign up for this shit. And then you take that out on that team. All trust, all culture, all love for the game, blown up, gone.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I do think there's definitely the systemic and structural stuff, like having the right supports and trainings for managers, all the things. I couldn't help but think about, so individually, how do we keep ourselves healthy? And do we tap into the resources we have available to us, like the ones that were listed at the beginning, or EAP, employee assistance programs? Talk to a friend. Oh my God, someone was joking that their patient, my friend was telling me that their patient was joking about that they stopped going to therapy. They just, you know, tell everyone their problems. And I thought that's like so effective and super affordable. Just find the right people to share your problems with. It's not the same as therapy. I do want to say that. Yep. And it does help. Like if you're just holding all this on your own and there's no one for you to talk with, that is problematic, right? So yes, there's professional structured ways to do that. Yes, maybe your manager is a great person who can hold that, but wouldn't it be great for us to train and support our managers to be able to hold that, and for them to be able to take care of themselves, be able to talk to someone, whether professionally or casually, to have the right, you know, not just like available PTO, because that's another thing, right? Some folks have unlimited PTO, but they never take time off because they feel like they can't, right? So like the ways in which we mix signal, like, yeah, we're for wellness, even wellness companies, right? We're for wellness, this, that, and the other. But when it comes down to it, how are you for wellness when folks are overworked, underappreciated, can't feel free to take time off, even though they have unlimited time off? They may or may not be sleeping well, which is a huge bummer. By the way, that is one of the, among many other things, one of the things that inspired me to do coaching with adults, because so many random folks, clients, strangers, friends, kept coming, just sharing thoughts. I guess I was one of those people that could just share with, which is great, about how poor they're sleeping. And how can you sleep well when you have all this stuff to manage? And it's so hard to turn that off. And then there's like a rise in sleep apnea and other sleep disorders. Anyway, so if you're not physically, emotionally well, even with all that training and support that's already not happening as a manager or as a human in your work setting, but even if it was happening, let's say that in a magical world it was, if you are falling apart, you know, dehydrated, haven't slept well, haven't eaten a, you know, solid meal, you're just like grabbing on to life, all that training doesn't matter, really. How are you going to implement that if your brain can't really grasp because you're so unwell? So I think that really we need to do more than lip service to, oh yeah, we're for wellness and we have all these PTO days and oh this and that, and the EAP, which we may or may not be able to access because it's designed pretty crappily. We actually need to do something about it and really truly care for folks to be able to get the support they need and just stop talking about it. Do something about it.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but like, and this was probably another issue that I found, was that the teams in IT that I worked with, so many of them worked, and despite so many attempts to mitigate it, so many of them chose to work in silo to each other. And then what that does is, you know, it also then minimizes your opportunity for building human relationships. And so where you talk to your friends, you know, generally others might talk to their friends about what's going on for them. In these industries, especially in my experience, in these departments, when I do go and work with bigger organizations who have IT support teams and IT development and all of that kind of big IT kind of structure, that team specifically tends to always be the team who don't have team building days, or if they do, it's a complete groan. Like, the thought of exuding energy with another human is loathsome to them.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, okay, well, I feel like this is part of who you are as a person. So how do we then help you build relationships that can help you build trust, so that if something isn't wrong, you can say, hey, here's where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
Have a candid conversation. Because the other piece of it is this plays out. So as I said before, I was an IT project manager. In my boardroom, the amount of times they wouldn't tell me what was going on when there were problems was so frustrating. So frustrating. And because the ego in there is like, I can't be seen to be the one that is making or holding up the project, or that my area of development has got bugs in it, or that my support team keep turning team members over and I can't, you know, fulfill the tickets, right? And so they don't want to speak up. They don't want to be that guy. And so the embarrassment and the shame that comes with that, and I think this was where, you know, I kind of came in, and I laugh that you say it's, you know, a feminine trait, but I think also I have slightly masculine traits as well, which is where I kind of work. You know, I can flex between the two, and I said, enough is enough. There's nothing here to be embarrassed about. There's nothing here. No one is here to shame you. We are here to work together, and we need to pull together to make this work. Like, we are costing the organization money by not speaking up. We are costing ourselves our reputations by not speaking up. You think it's a problem if you come out and say, I'm the problem? I think if you come out and say you're the problem, you're a hero to me, right? And we need more people who are willing to make that group of employees feel safe about speaking up. And that goes, so when you give them that space to feel safe about speaking up about what's going on in their day, then you can kind of see how that starts. And it started to translate into them being able to feel safe about speaking up about other things. And so the whole culture shift is, I mean, it takes time. You have to prove to them that they are safe in speaking up. Like, I had to have conversations with their boss's boss to make sure that when I went and reported, hey, actually, SIT is 4 weeks behind and it's going to cost us X, that then that follow-up conversation was me having the empathy to say, hey, I've told them there will be no consequences, because they came up and they told us up front and they were honest about what was going on. And so this is how we need to support them now. And so having that education piece to the hierarchy above me to say, hey, I'm like working my tail off to get these guys, and I say guys predominantly because I was the only female in that whole project, in that whole IT area, to say, hey, you know, like, we need to get these guys speaking up. We need to feel like they can tell us where they're at in so much more than just the work they do.
Yeah. One thought about this, though, and this may be another podcast because I know that we might be running out of time for the time being, but I think yes to all that you said, and I can't help but wonder about like neurodiversity and some folks, some folks
Second
are
podcast.
different thing. Some
Part
folks,
two.
they just are not able to do the simple things that many of us see as very simple and straightforward without the coaching and support. They may not even be aware that this is happening. It's not that they're willingly not wanting to communicate, or they're just being difficult, or maybe there's an ego. I mean, there's always an ego, but it could just be that they genuinely don't know what you're asking, and not because they're not smart or intelligent. They just simply cannot compute. And we need to find more creative, less sort of mainstream, cater to the norm ways to communicate with folks, and to bring all folks into the, those that might be just more shy. There's nothing wrong with being shy.
I agree.
Setting, it does kind of, can be a disadvantage in some cases, unfortunately, right? So just how do we become more inclusive in that regard and more insightful about what folks need, and lead with that?
I'm glad you used that word inclusive, because I do believe that this is a diversity issue. Not necessarily, of course, it's not the diversity issue that everyone's having, but it is a diversity issue that we be able to adapt to these people. And hearing you guys talk about it, it's just a reminder that there's hope, that
Guys,
50 years ago, 60 years ago, this was pretty rough. We were in a rough spot 50, 60 years ago. And hopefully, if you are trying to turn your business around, turn your team around, and build this trust, hopefully we've given you some ideas about how to do that. Yes, it's a ton of work. No, you can't trust your HR department to be aware of your mental health and everyone in your team's mental health, but maybe you can. Maybe you can take some time to focus on your mental health and your team's mental health. In the meantime, though, I do want to thank you all for being here. What a great episode. Dr. Torres, how can people connect with you and learn more?
Yes, you can go to my website, torresphd.com. I'm mostly focusing on sleep coaching at this point, and I do still engage in some product and program development and clinical trainings and supervision as well. So torresphd.com.
Good stuff. It's Torres PhD?
Yeah, TORRES PhD.com.
Okay, excellent. And Aileen, where can people reach you and learn more?
Probably the easiest place to go is aileenday.com.au. So AILEEN Finelli.com.au, and you can catch all my socials there, and any hints of advisory work that you might need for building your customer experience and your employee experience. And I talk about, ultimately the joy of sex. So the customer, the employee, and the human experience. So I didn't make it up. Well, actually, no, I did make it up. I added the human experience. I was shocked that it wasn't already there.
It's an people are going to catch that one from this episode, definitely.
Yeah, the universe went, here, Aileen, make this yours.
Yeah, exactly. And Emily, how can people connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, for me, it's empathicengineering.org. And I speak to employee resource groups. I talk to people one-on-one, and I work with teams. My big theme is mindfulness. So reach out and we'll set up a phone call.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being on Ticket Volume.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
And for our audience, did you know that you can actually improve this podcast by DMing me, leaving a comment, or just saying something nasty on the internet? I'm not kidding. I'll probably see it. It's just another way to turn up the ticket volume. And speaking of ticket volume, did you know that this podcast is brought to you by InvGate? InvGate is a fit-for-purpose service management solution with integrated asset management designed to let you focus on supporting your organization without waiting for admins and IT teams to make the changes that you need for your processes. In fact, IT teams from Toyota, NASA, and McDonald's use InvGate to manage requests, automate workflows, and centralize inventory data so that they can focus on delivering better service, because good service is good business.